So before there was anything, and I mean anything, there was just God. No universe, no earth, no light. Literally nothing but void and chaos, complete darkness. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. Just spoke it into existence like that. Day one. Boom. Light exists now. Then he's like, okay, but we need structure. So he separates the waters, makes the sky. Day two. Then gathers all the waters so dry land appears and calls it earth. Day three. But he's not done. Same day, he's like, let's get some vegetation going. And suddenly there's plants, trees, seeds. The whole ecosystem just appears. Day four. He makes the sun, moon, and stars. Basically, the entire cosmic lighting system and calendar. Day five. Fish and birds. Everything that swims and flies. He creates it and tells them, be fruitful and multiply. First command ever given BTW. Day 6 is where it gets wild because he makes all the land animals, everything from cattle to creeping things, and then he makes humans. But here's the thing, he makes them in his image, male and female, and gives them dominion over literally everything else he just made. The entire planet, every creature, they're in charge. Day 7, God rests, like he literally institutes the concept of a day off after creating the entire universe. The audacity, the power, unmatched. Ready for Genesis 2 where it gets more personal? Okay, so Genesis 1 was the big picture, but now we're zooming in and getting the details, and honey, it's different vibes. So God forms this man, Adam, out of literal dust from the ground like dirt, and then breathes life into him directly, mouth to mouth, basically. That's how intimate this creation is. Then God plants this gorgeous garden in Eden. We're talking paradise. Every tree that's beautiful and has good fruit, and puts Adam there to work it and take care of it. So yes, even in paradise there was a job. Let that sink in. Now here's the setup for literally everything that's about to go wrong. God tells Adam, you can eat from any tree in this garden, go crazy, except the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. That one, don't even touch it. You eat from that and you will die. First rule ever given. But then God is like, it's not good for man to be alone, even though God is right there with him, but okay. So he brings every animal and bird to Adam to name them, like Adam is just out here going, that's a lion, that's an eagle, that's a platypus, I guess. But none of them are a suitable helper for him. So what does God do? Puts Adam into a deep sleep, first surgery, takes one of his ribs and builds a woman from it. Builds her. Adam wakes up and sees her and basically says, finally, bone of my bones, flesh of my flesh. He's shook. This is woman, and they're both naked and completely unbothered about it. That's the setup. They're in paradise. One rule, a man, a woman, and a sneaky tree they're not supposed to touch. Okay, so now we meet the villain of this story, the serpent, and not just any snake. This one is described as more crafty than any other animal, which is already suspect. So the serpent slithers up to Eve. Yes, Eve, not Adam, and we'll get to that. And it's like, did God really say you can't eat from any tree in the garden? Playing dumb, starting mess. And Eve's like, no, we can eat from the trees, just not the one in the middle of the garden. We can't eat from it or even touch it or we'll die. And this snake has the audacity to say, you won't die. God knows that when you eat it, your eyes will be opened and you'll be like God, knowing good and evil. Basically calling God a liar and suggesting he's gatekeeping power from them. The manipulation. So Eve looks at this tree, the fruit looks good, it's pleasing to the eye, and it'll make her wise. And she takes it and eats it, then gives some to her husband and he eats it too. Immediately, their eyes are opened. They realize they're naked and they're mortified. They sew fig leaves together to make coverings. The shame is instant. Then they hear God walking in the garden in the cool of the day, casual stroll, and they hide. God calls out, "Where are you?" He knows where they are. He's God, but he's giving them a chance to come clean. Adam's like, "I heard you and I was afraid because I was naked, so I hid." God, "Who told you that you were naked? Did you eat from that tree?" And here's where Adam shows his true colors. "The woman you gave me, she gave me fruit and I ate it." Threw Eve under the bus and blamed God for giving her to him. The disrespect. So God turns to Eve. "What have you done?" Eve, "The serpent deceived me and I ate." At least she's honest about being tricked. Now God hands out consequences. To the serpent, he was cursed above all animals, will crawl on its belly and eat dust, and there will be beef between it and humans. To Eve, he told her, pain in childbirth is gonna be rough, and she'll desire her husband, but he'll rule over her. This is where patriarchy enters the chat, and it's presented as part of the curse, not the original design. To Adam, he said, the ground is now cursed because of him. He'll work hard and struggle with thorns and thistles, will eat by the sweat of his brow until he returns to dust, because that's what he's made of. Then God makes them proper clothes out of animal skins, first death, first sacrifice, and says, now that they know good and evil like us, we can't let them eat from the tree of life and live forever in this state. Oh, and wait. Before we get to the banishment, can we talk about what God says in verse 22? Because it's fascinating and honestly raises questions. God says, the man has now become like one of us, knowing good and evil. One of us, who is us. There are a few interpretations here. Some say this is the Trinity, God the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit in conversation. This shows up in Genesis 1:2 when God says, let us make man in our image. Others say God is speaking to the heavenly court, the angels and divine beings in his presence. Others say it's a royal we, like how royalty sometimes refers to themselves in plural. But here's what's wild. God is essentially confirming what the serpent said was true. They do now know good and evil like God does. They're not lying dead on the ground. Their eyes were opened. The serpent wasn't totally lying about that part. But, and this is key, knowing good and evil without God's wisdom, maturity, or moral perfection, that's not the upgrade. The serpent made it sound like it's actually a burden. They now know shame, fear, and guilt. They understand evil by experiencing it, not just observing it from a holy position like God does. So God's like, now that they're in this state, we cannot let them eat from the tree of life and live forever like this, because living forever in a fallen, sinful state would be a curse, not a blessing. So he banishes them from Eden and posts cherubim, warrior angels, with a flaming sword that flashes back and forth to guard the way back to the tree of life. Paradise, lost. Humanity, forever changed, all because of one conversation with a snake. Okay, so Adam and Eve are out of the garden now, living in the cursed world, and they start having kids. First up, Cain. Eve says, with the Lord's help, I have brought forth a man. She's excited, probably thinking this is part of God's promise about her offspring. Then they have Abel. Now Abel becomes a shepherd, takes care of sheep and flocks, and Cain works the ground, farmer like his dad. Time passes, and they both bring offerings to God. Abel brings the fat portions from the firstborn of his flock, so he's giving God the best, the first and finest of what he has. Cain brings some of the fruits of the soil, just some produce, not specified as the first or the best, just some. And here's where it gets loaded. God looks with favor on Abel and his offering, but not on Cain and his offering. Now wait, why did God reject Cain's offering? The text doesn't explicitly say, but here are the clues. Quality matters. Abel gave his firstborn and the fat portions. The best parts Cain just gave some, suggests he wasn't giving his best. Heart matters. Later in the New Testament, Hebrews 11:4, it says Abel offered his gift by faith. So Cain is furious. His face is downcast. He's in his feelings heavy. And God comes to him and says, "Why are you angry? Why is your face downcast? If you do what is right, will you not be accepted? But if you do not do what is right, sin is crouching at your door. It desires to have you, but you must rule over it." This is important. God is basically saying, Cain, you can fix this. Do the right thing and you'll be accepted. But right now, sin is like a predator waiting at your door ready to pounce on you. You need to master it. Don't let it master you. God is giving him a warning and a way out. Does Cain listen? Nope. Cain says to Abel, "Let's go out to the field." And when they're out there, Cain attacks his brother Abel and murders him. This becomes the first murder ever. And it's brother killing brother over jealousy and rejected worship. God comes to Cain again, giving him a chance. "Where is your brother Abel?" And Cain, with the audacity, says, "I don't know, am I my brother's keeper?" Sarcastic, dismissive, lying to God's face. God says, "What have you done? Your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground." The ground that Cain works, by the way, that imagery hits different. Cain's punishment. The ground will no longer yield crops for him. His whole livelihood gone. He'll be a restless wanderer on the earth. He's cursed, driven from God's presence. And now Cain is scared. My punishment is more than I can bear. You're driving me from the land, from your presence. I'll be a wanderer, and whoever finds me will kill me. Wait, whoever finds me? Who else is there? Good question. Adam and Eve had other children. We find this out later, and they're all having kids too. By this time, there could be multiple generations around. The text just focuses on these main characters, but humanity is multiplying in the background. God responds with mercy, even in judgment. He puts a mark on Cain so that no one who finds him will kill him. God even pronounces that anyone who kills Cain will suffer vengeance 7 times over. So Cain leaves God's presence and settles in the land of Nod, east of Eden, further away from the original paradise. Then Cain's family line. Cain has a wife, again, sister or relative from Adam and Eve's other kids. Humanity had to start somehow, and genetic problems weren't an issue yet with a pure gene pool. They have a son, Enoch, and Cain builds a city and names it after his son. His descendants include Lamech, who becomes the second murderer and has the audacity to brag about it in a poem to his wives. Yes, plural. Polygamy enters the chat here too. Meanwhile, back with Adam and Eve, they have another son, Seth, because God gave them another child to replace Abel. Eve literally says, "God has granted me another child in place of Abel since Cain killed him." And Seth has a son named Enosh. And here's a beautiful line. At that time, people began to call on the name of the Lord. So even in the tragedy, there's a faithful line continuing. Ready for Genesis 5? It's actually going to feel calmer. It's basically a genealogy. But there are some wild details in there. Okay, so Genesis 5 is basically a family tree. But stay with me because there are some absolutely wild details we need to talk about. This chapter starts with a reminder. This is the written account of Adam's family line. When God created mankind, he made them in the likeness of God. He created them male and female and blessed them. And he named them mankind when they were created. Then we get the ages. And listen, I need you to sit down for this because these numbers are insane. Adam lives 930 years total, has Seth when he's 130 years old, then has other sons and daughters for another 800 years, 930 years, 930. Seth lives 912 years, has Enosh at 105, then lives another 807 years having other children. Enosh lives 905 years. Kenan lives 910 years. Mahalalel lives 895 years. Jared lives 962 years, almost 1,000. Now here's where it gets really interesting. Enoch lives only 365 years, which sounds short compared to everyone else, right? But check this out. The text says Enoch walked faithfully with God. Then he was no more because God took him away. He did not die. God just took him. Enoch walked with God so closely that God basically said, you know what? Just come home, and teleported him to heaven. He is one of only 2 people in the entire Bible who never experienced death. The other is Elijah, but we will get to that way later. Walked faithfully with God appears twice about Enoch in just 3 verses. This man had a relationship with God that was so intimate, so close, that God made an exception to the whole death thing. Methuselah, Enoch's son, lives 969 years, the oldest person ever recorded in the Bible, 969 years. His name actually means, when he dies, it shall come. And guess what happens the year Methuselah dies? The flood. But we will get to that in Genesis 6. Lamech lives 777 years. He is Noah's father. When Noah is born, Lamech says, he will comfort us in the labor and painful toil of our hands caused by the ground the Lord has cursed. He is referencing back to Genesis 3, the curse on the ground. He is hoping Noah will bring some relief. Noah. The chapter ends with Noah at 500 years old, and he has 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. We will hear a lot more about Noah. Now let's talk about why people live so long, because you are probably wondering. Some explanations scholars give pre-flood conditions. The environment for the flood may have been radically different. Some think there was a water vapor canopy that protected from radiation and created ideal conditions. Genetic purity. Humanity was closer to the original creation. Genetic mutations and defects had not accumulated over generations yet. God's design, these lifespans allowed humanity to multiply quickly. One person could see multiple generations and pass down information directly. Adam could have told his great-great-great-great-grandchildren about the Garden of Eden firsthand, literal versus figurative. Some scholars debate whether these are literal years or symbolic, though the text presents them as straightforward chronology. After the flood, lifespans start dropping dramatically. Noah lives 950 years, but by Abraham's time, we are down to 175. And by Moses, it is 120, and eventually, we get to the 70, which is 70 to 80 years that we consider normal today. What's the point of this whole chapter? It is showing the faithful line from Adam through Seth to Noah. This is the lineage that stays connected to God. Remember Cain's line from chapter 4? That line ends in violence and boasting. But Seth's line? It leads to people who walk with God, who call on his name, and ultimately to Noah, who will save humanity from the flood. It is also fulfilling Genesis 1, where God said, "Be fruitful and multiply." Humanity is multiplying. Each of these men has other sons and daughters. The earth is filling up with people. But here is the dark refrain that repeats over and over. And then he died, and then he died, and then he died. Death, the consequence of sin from Genesis 3, is now just a reality of human existence. Except for Enoch. Enoch is the exception that proves God can still override death when he chooses. That is Genesis 5. A genealogy? Yes, but one that shows God's faithfulness through generations and sets up everything that is about to happen next.